Welcome. We will open the meeting for our bylaw review committee on Thursday, July 21st, 2022 at 7:04. And Waffle Media is here with us. I think since our last meeting, we have made a lot of progress, and I feel really good that we'll be ready for the fall warrant. So tonight, we will go over the language changes in about 8 bylaws. We'll see how the meeting goes. I don't feel that we need to vote on them right away, and I'm gonna go over the timeline and the feedback that we received since the last meeting. Tonight, Pat is away tonight, Pat Fasanello, Jeff Fisher is away tonight, and Nancy Dane is away this evening as well. So, Doug is pulling up.
I'm just pulling up everything, so it's ready,
Yep.
so. go ahead.
Okay, so here's what will go on as we kind of finalize this. So in the general bylaws, the first section of the general bylaws, which we are in charge of reviewing, in our last meeting, we had decided about 8 bylaws that we were not gonna recommend any changes to. So that is bylaw 1, 13, 34, 39, 93, 195, 202 and 210 were put with Pat, and I had reached out to him, and he had not given me any feedback of anything specific at this time. He will be back in August, so that will give us a little bit more time if he did have some changes. But at this time, the committee has not pinpointed any changes to those bylaws. Our recommendation would be to remove bylaw 22, which is that permanent building advisory committee. And then at this time, we will be asking for an extension for the animal control bylaw, since we're just in our second year of a intermunicipal agreement. It's not really ready yet, so let's get through 3 years of seeing how that, get through this year and next year's town budget. They'll kind of look at that again, see where that intermunicipal agreement goes, and then I think we'll be ready to review the animal one. And then there's 8 bylaws that we have worked on language changes. And for the most part, they're pretty minor changes. Again, we're working on gender neutral, current, best practice for these bylaws. So I did speak with Jim. So we will be the sponsoring committee for the bylaws for the warrant. So we do have a little bit more time. Our last meeting, we were thinking that we would have to present to the select board before it got on the warrant. The warrant closes out in about August 23rd. That's not the case. So we will at some point be presenting to FinCom once the warrant closes, as everyone who sponsors an article does come forward in front of FinCom to explain those articles and review, and if FinCom members have questions for us and things of that nature. So we will be finishing up these language changes. We will get it to Jim Johnson and to Town Council to review, and then we will be the sponsor committee for these articles. So one question is it 8 articles or 9 articles? Because we will be recommending for 1 article to be removed, 1 large article, or do we try to see if they're, Dan, as town moderator, would want to present it as a consent agenda. Thank you. Yes. So I'm like, what are the words I'm looking for? Consent agenda. So we haven't really gotten through that yet, but I really have, after getting the feedback, Doug and I, after the last meeting, really kind of very quickly reached out to everyone that was on our punch list of people we were seeking feedback from. We'll go over that feedback tonight, and it's pretty minor for the most part changes to the 8 bylaws. So I really think that we should be ready for town meeting, which will be great. And that, except for asking for that 1 extension for animal control, we would have done our due diligence and completed the task, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
That is my goal. Any other input?
There were some, you had the revolving funds. So I'd reached out,
yes.
and we can wait on that? I don't know
Yep.
how if you want to go in order, or?
Let's go in order,
Okay.
and we'll bring that up as the feedback,
Okay.
so we'll kind of go through each article.
I have one quick question, Ally, if I could.
Yep.
Just on, I know I missed the last meeting, so on the status of what is our plan for the remainder of the bylaws that we think we maybe were charged with reviewing, but we were told to hold off? What do we, is there a formal plan for that yet, or no?
No, there is not. The guidance I was given was general bylaws, this first section.
Yeah.
I think the committee, we can kind of regroup after and see what the consensus is and reach out and kind of talk to town council, then town administrator, as well as Dan Bruce, town moderator who appointed the committee, to see if we should go further.
I like that, especially since we will be asking for an extension on the animal control officer, so this committee will have more work to do and potentially recommendations to make at the Springtown meeting. And I think that gives us a little bit of time to talk to the town council, ask for an interpretation of our scope of responsibilities, and then we can go from there if we have a whole bunch of more work that lands on our plates.
Right. And I think at this point, we probably have one more meeting before the warrant closes, in which we will vote officially as a committee, and hopefully we'll have more than just a minimum quorum with the recommendations. Because there's still a few that are a little bit out, questions. I think that would be the goal, is that one more meeting that we could make a formal vote on every single article and our recommendations, and forward it all to the town administrator's office. Which will be hard, I know, with vacations and stuff. I think I'm probably right now looking at like the third week in August.
That's vacation or meeting?
A meeting. Are you away?
Um,
We can look at dates a little bit
yeah.
later.
Yeah, I'm gonna be away,
Same.
Same.
so,
Okay,
yeah.
so I'll be here. I have 1 week I'm away, so that's gonna be the harder thing, is getting that final meeting in. And maybe the last meeting
Do we know the deadline?
about August 23rd.
So that 23rd deadline is, then we present to FinCom after that.
Once a town warrant is closed, we would not be presenting to FinCom till October.
Right. But what we're presenting to them is locked in as of the 23rd.
Once the warrant's closed, it's locked in.
Okay.
Can we lock in
When do you go?
in general, like just bylaw changes and present specific?
Language.
I'm just looking at the calendar, right? And if we
Yeah.
can't do, the third week in August is, depending on how you want to look at it, the 15th is the third Monday in August. Are you guys leaving on the 15th?
Leave the 17th.
Okay,
I leave on the 16th.
because I'm just thinking, the school starts the 30th,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously the warrant closes the week before, but if we got something generic in there and then finalized language that week of the 30th, we'd have something in the warrant, and we'd clean up the language.
So I will check with Jim on that, because that is usually some space,
Yeah.
but it has to still be within the realm, so
Right.
possibly.
I think it makes more sense if we can to try to get the language finished, and
Yeah.
if the meeting has to be a phone call, then we can.
Well, I was gonna say, we still have, with the extension of the remote meetings, we would still have an option that we could do a remote Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
That we could vote on.
Is that when you're taking your cruise?
I will be on a cruise ship.
Okay.
What, but does this, you're
I will be
leaving
literally out at sea.
this on the 16th,
On the 16th, I'll probably be on a transatlantic flight.
but the 15th maybe, Monday?
Maybe, yes, maybe.
Like a quick half an hour,
If it's quick, yeah.
quick half an hour.
Yeah, my
7
parents are
p.m.
coming in town.
Just to approve the
To-
previously
Yeah.
written circulated form,
Yeah.
shouldn't take long of a meeting, right? if
That's
we
what I'm
get it.
kind of thinking right now.
Although you're not needed if the other people are available.
Well, yes, that's true. I mean, I would like to participate if it's possible, but
All right, so let's put that tentative down then for the 15th, and do a Zoom virtual meeting. And it would be, the agenda would just specifically be to final vote on all of the articles.
Yeah, and we'll have to check with the three people that aren't here as well. And if they all happen to be away too, then we'll have to come up with something before the 15th
Something
if we
else.
have to, but let's see.
Saturday morning, 7 AM.
Just meet at Country Kitchen, do a quick.
Yeah, I know. Remote meeting. All right, so let's start with chapter 17. This was the Permanent Building Committee bylaw. One of our members, Jeff Fisher, was looking for more specific language as when the Permanent Building Committee was involved. Dug through, put some language in there and put in a place mark of 5 million. At this time, we haven't received more feedback. Right, Doug?
Correct.
You-
I reached out to Jeff just to see if he had anything, and I haven't heard anything back yet, so.
My
And-
question on that was simply, is this, when it says any municipal construction or renovation project regardless of its funding source, that implies it's not just buildings.
Yeah. So what I was trying to do is give the committee the discretion to be involved in whatever they want, anytime they want, and kind of say, I guess it's at their discretion when it's after a certain value. I guess that's what it was, because the big thing that I heard about was the fields. They weren't involved in the fields, but they thought, given that value, that they should. So I just started it at 5 million. I think David had suggested a lower number. That's where I was kind of looking for some input from.
The DPW building was another,
How much was it?
Yeah.
Well, they'd be involved in the DPW building anyway, right?
Well, that's what, if they feel like they need to, they can be.
Well,
If they don't
that's a
wanna
permanent
be.
building, right?
Yeah,
So they would be involved without
yeah,
that
but
threshold.
did you say they weren't?
I don't
Yeah.
Yeah.
think they were.
So, but it was just to give them the ability, and I was kind of gonna look to Jeff to set a threshold, but it wasn't, it was,
And the feedback I got from Jim Johnson was that seemed reasonable.
I mean,
5 million at this time may seem a little high, but with the cost of construction increasing,
yeah, I mean, I think it's if we're empowering them to be involved, as a watchdog, so to speak, for the rest of the community, 5 million to me does seem high. I mean, if you're saying the town's gonna spend $2.5 million and they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Right, that's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
So you'd think maybe these guys should be involved with a lower threshold than just 5 million.
I was actually thinking 2.5.
Yeah.
2.5 to me seems more reasonable, because they have the option then to say that they don't want to be involved.
Of course.
Right.
Right, so,
that was my intent.
yeah,
I think 2 to 3, somewhere in the 2 to 3 is more.
yeah, I agree.
More defendable to the general public that, you know.
okay, and that's something certain that we can change that, it was just kind of
Yeah.
a placehold, as we were, Jeff is a member of the permanent building committee as well, so we're kind of looking for his feedback. As he said, like, the building, it's a committee that's appointed, it's not a full appointment, so $1 million on windows or $1 million roof, they do not really want to be involved with, but something of a bigger project, the fields, DPW, that would be appropriate.
Were there any comments on the membership aspect of it?
No, I didn't touch the membership aspect of it. We did bring it up with Glenn when he was here. You know, he'd asked if it was who appointed the committee. It was pointed out that it was a select board committee, but we didn't touch it further than that. Do you want it?
No, when I was looking at it, it's really just a question of, I think we've had a hard time putting people on that board, right? And so, 3 members at large is good, 1 lawyer, 1 engineer, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if they're having difficulty, I wonder if the restriction should be loosened or not.
I don't know. I don't know if they're having trouble, if they're just, they don't
Not
have as
doing
much interest.
Well, that's what I mean.
And so,
Yeah.
if you,
I wouldn't want, if there becomes interest, though, I also wouldn't want to restrict it that it couldn't go back to a full 7.
No, I guess what I'm saying is, should there be more at-large members and less, do we need the person that is serving on the particular construction project's petitioning board? Do we need a lawyer? Do we need an engineer? Do we need, you tend to want those things, but if that's creating a vacancy that's making it difficult, just
Right, although if you
throwing it
have
out there.
people that have no experience, then they're really of no value either.
Right, so it's you have to figure out if it's actually gonna be full. I think Jeff said it hasn't been full in quite some time. I don't know how we get the select board to do that. I guess you just have to, we have to put out a call for more people.
Yeah.
I think the school should maybe spur some of that, right?
You would think.
Because that's gonna be happening. And so it's a good opportunity
Well, currently, right now, all members of the permanent building committee are on the middle school building committee, I believe. Because of the nature of the MSBA and the appointments that need to be on that committee. So this one, we're still waiting a little bit more feedback on. But I'm gonna note the changes of the questions of at-large members to follow up on that side too.
I don't feel that strongly about it, just wanted to bring it up.
Okay, so the next one was chapter 45. David, you promoted some of this language changes. There was some feedback, just a little bit of confusion. I don't think I heard a follow-up just yet on that one.
There was a lot of, I don't know what document you used, some special lawyer document, but I had a heck of a time sending these changes to Jim.
Oh, okay.
When I downloaded it, it didn't show the edits.
Okay. Yeah, I'm using LibreOffice, which is a free alternative to Microsoft Word. And you're supposed to be able to open the documents in Word.
And I could see it, but when I emailed it to people, it wasn't, they couldn't pull it up. So
And
I
I
had to
think-
put it in a Google Doc and download it into Word to get it. And even now, you can see that it doesn't, it's got your annotations, but it doesn't spell out what they were.
The explanations on it.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, on Google Docs, I could see the edits, but when I just opened it up in Microsoft Word, it did not show it.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind for future submissions.
But Jim asked, we sent Jim a copy of the language, he couldn't open it, sent him this version, and we just haven't heard back yet, so.
Oh, okay.
So I think the question was more, Doug pointed out to Jim where it was in the video, where you went over each notation and explanation for why. Because just when opening it, looked like there was a lot of suggestions, and it was like, where were all these suggestions coming from? So Doug had pointed out where it was in our video, that it was on Waltham Media, and then we discussed about really what we were looking for was to define officer a little bit more clearly, and that you were looking for just having kind of more consistent language within this bylaw. Were really the two main points behind the changes.
Okay, and as to that first point, I've done some research since our last meeting, and I think I have a satisfactory answer for exactly who a town officer is. And I won't bore you with all the details of the legal research, but there are two particularly relevant provisions of the general laws that talk about town officers. And the relevant one here is Chapter 41, Section 1. Chapter 41, surprisingly enough, is titled Officers and Employees of Cities, Towns, and Districts. Wouldn't you know, there's a law. And Section 1 lists town officers to be elected at annual meetings. And there's a very long list of them. And they include all of the usual suspects: town clerk, town treasurer, tax collector, select board, assessors, auditors. It goes on and on and on. So I think with respect to defining for our bylaws who a town officer is, I think it's sufficient just to make reference to this Chapter 41, which lists out all of these different officers.
But that, to me, seems like it would be exactly the opposite of what our idea of town officer was.
Yeah, and I think that confusion stemmed from the other major reference that I was already aware of in the general laws, which came from the election law. And that was Chapter 50. And Chapter 50 has a definition section, that says town officer shall apply to and include town meeting members. Okay, so you can see how I'd get confused by that. However, that definition applies to chapters 50 to 57, which is the Massachusetts election law specifically. And so I think the purpose of that definition was so that the legislature could just write, you know, when you're electing town officers, you do this and this and this, as opposed to when you're electing town officers and town meeting members, you know, in representative town meeting, you know, towns, you know, because town officer appears all over the place in the election law. So I think that was just kind of a shorthand specifically for the purpose of election law and doesn't apply to, you know, the issues that are before us.
And so if we want to, in my mind, now that you brought this up, if we want, you know, after talking with Jim, town officer was really department head.
Right.
So we either change this to department head, or we reference section 41 and then open it up to a whole host of people. And I don't know that either is
Although,
going to be.
yeah, I mean, I think, I'm just looking at section 41 here too. I mean, it's clerk, treasurer, tax collectors, select board, assessors, auditors, highway surveyors, road commissioners, sewer commissioners, tree wardens, constables, all that, like that's, and we're not talking, at least my understanding is, the people that we want to use this provision here, to engaging town council, I mean, not that these individuals couldn't be included in that, but we would want the chief of police to be able to deal with town council. We would want somebody else to be able to engage with town council. So this isn't all encompassing, the chapter 41 definition isn't all encompassing. So it's really either, I think that we have to come up with a definition. If it's, whatever term we want to use, we don't have to, but
Right.
what's the list of positions that we want to be able to take advantage of this?
Is it worth asking town council who they would actually want to hear from?
Well, so that was part of our meeting with Jim, and in general, town council would not respond without, anytime there's town council involved, in general, the department head, the select board, FinCom, would seek Jim out first, because sometimes there's already been town council opinion on that subject that he can then share, or he reaches out. So town council in general would not initiate conversation unless there's kind of a go-ahead from
Yeah.
town administrator
Or select board.
or select board.
I mean, there's, of course, you've got like bad actors and whistleblower kind of things, which is a different thing. That's not really what this provision, I don't think, is intended to address, which is just general course of business through the appointed body or the elected body. They should, you know, so.
Well, yeah, one other thing is that particular section does say, and I hate this because it's ambiguous, but it says all other town officers shall be appointed by the selectmen unless other provision is made by law or vote of the town. So I think those issues about department heads, especially the appointed ones and the town employees, could be kind of shoehorned into that, you know.
So then we also go by what is current practice? And that was part
Right.
of our, gender neutral current practice, what is relevant? And we've already said that, how we are doing it, how is that generally department heads, elected officials, committees would go through the town administrator first. So I don't
Right.
wanna make this bylaw too restrictive, but I also don't wanna make it too open, because if we just leave it as town officers and take the definition from chapter 41, section 1, then we've really kind of, haven't included the department heads, which in general, very much so have access to town council as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're essentially, we want to include even if we changed town officers to department heads, or if we left it as town officers, we would probably want to say,
Including.
upon approval of the town administrator.
I think you should have a second person in there, though, too. Don't we need a second person? Because I'm afraid if you give Jim all the power to say who can communicate with town council, if it were an issue that was
that's-
something to do with Jim himself,
Well,
that somebody
well-
else needs to be able to.
I don't disagree, but I think the way it's written here, and it's hard for me to see it there, I'm just looking at it on my phone, but it says, which may be required of council by vote of the town or any board or committee of the town, or by town officers. So any board can talk to can request the select board, the FinCom, they can request it on their own, right? So if we're talking about department heads with permission of the town administrator or the board of, the select board, maybe that's the simplest solution.
That's a good
Because
way
if
to-
there's a
yeah.
problem with Jim, nobody's gonna go to Jim to ask
And I think
them.
there really are safeguards in place that
Yeah,
if there was someone who really would seek it because there was an issue, a concern, the select board, a department, school department has town council as,
Yep.
as well.
Mhm.
ZBA, they certainly have people other than Jim who reaches out, depending on what the
Right.
situation is. So I think I'm not okay with just including town officers with chapter 41, section 1 as a definition. I'd like to add department heads in as well.
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, so you wouldn't consider department heads to be appointed?
Well, let's say,
They're
just
employees of the town.
like the recreation department,
Okay.
he's not appointed, the director, he's hired.
he's hired.
Right, okay.
I mean, do they all go through the select board before do they get formally appointed?
Well, the recreation language says that the recreation director is appointed by the town administrator, so I don't think he would have to go through this.
Yeah, I don't know, do they have to approve all the hiring decisions? No?
The select board for most of those department heads, I think, do go through the select board.
Just for approval of the town
Because also
administrators?
select board has taken over personnel board.
That's right.
So I would say, going forward, yes. So generally, personnel board with select board, personnel board, usually town administrator, kind of all three sign off.
So then, would it be appropriate in the second paragraph here to include department head when requested by any board or committee or department head of the town, et cetera, et cetera? And then the rest of that paragraph talks about all the process to go through the select board or their, authorized agent, and blah, 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 blah. Because I think that might help.
Right, and the authorized agent, when it comes to a department head, is generally town administrator,
Right.
Right,
first and foremost.
okay. I think that's an additive change, I like that. It still doesn't resolve the question of town officer, though.
No, but like you stated, chapter 41, section 1 states town officer. So for us to redefine town officer as a committee, I think is a little bit,
Yeah, I wouldn't presume to redefine town officer. But the bylaw currently refers to town officers, and I think, Brad, that was your point. Who are these people?
I mean,
And
it's
so
the
that was sort of
bylaw.
my answer to that question was, here's what the general law says.
Yeah,
So-
the bylaw doesn't say what town officers are, so
Right.
if we're gonna say department heads and town officers as defined under chapter 41, section 1, we could do that. Or we could just leave it the way it is and keep it ambiguous, but also add department heads, that's okay too.
I think referencing it, that's my personal opinion, would be referencing chapter 41, section 1, and as well add department heads.
I think that makes the
Yes.
cleanest sense.
I like that.
I like that.
And then going into what is the course of action would be select board. And what was the other piece of it? Just looking through my red, authorized agent, which would be town administrator. And I don't know if we want to write that out specifically.
No, because sometimes it might be Bridget, right?
It could be Bridget, exactly.
Or the chief, I suppose, if.
Like I said, chief, chair of ZBA.
Yeah.
There's,
So I don't think we need to define it any more than that in terms of, because the select board is gonna authorize that, but they could authorize you, Doug to solicit, opinion of town council for some reason, and that's okay, because they authorized it, so that's okay.
and I would say this is the bylaw that we've put kind of the most language changes into, for the ones that we're recommending change to.
Yep.
We had a big discussion about commissioner, committee, commissions, do we just not?
We did have a big
Go there.
discussion about that.
Part of what you wanted to do, David, was bring this into conformance with the town website, which includes commissions.
Well, I think it was also state. Was it?
I think it was state too. I
You
remember
have
that.
any commissions?
Yeah, Historical Commission.
Conservation Commission.
Okay, yeah, that's,
Library trustees,
So,
housing authority.
I don't think we have, what that's
I
termed.
mean,
to.
are the sewer and water
Is it already, or
commissioners
is it-
technically, I guess?
well, they would be under that elected, since they're elected.
As
would
elected
they be-
board or
yeah, they're
committee,
elected, yeah.
It says elected board or committee, doesn't it?
But I mean, that's something I'm almost okay with leaving
Yeah.
ambiguous.
But that's what the conversation was like, well, actually, we have a lot of commissions, we have historical, we have trustees and that are our elected bodies.
Yeah, I think talking about trying to not make this thing a complete red line, I think is important. And the reality is if the library trustees have something that comes up that requires them to involve themselves with town council in any way, we know they're going to the select board, we know they're going to the town administrator and whoever else here to help them through that. So,
Through the process.
practically speaking, they're not gonna go rogue. And we know the town council is not gonna just start working on something because
Right.
one of the library trustees
Sees-
called them. That's not how it
Yeah.
works, so.
All right, is that all the changes on chapter 45 that we want to discuss?
I think so.
I think so. I'll type something up and
Type something
with
up.
those changes and
This one more so, I
recirculate it.
think, for Jim Johnson for review and town council review is probably one that we may come back to one more time.
Yep.
Okay, the next one was chapter 88, which is the finance committee. We did have feedback from our vice chair, Denny, from the finance committee. I do not think we've heard back from Mark Trudell, who's the current chair.
Correct.
This language that we reviewed was just very minor changes, and we did receive feedback from Jim, which he felt, this is fine, it's just changing from chairman to chair, vice chairman to vice chair. The only other feedback I think we got was instead of just at his regular scheduled meeting following the annual town election, to put the annual June town election.
Well, that was something that Brad had said, and I don't think I ever responded to that.
I mean,
Um,
I understand the annual town election to be June.
And I just didn't put it in because it wasn't June before, and if we ever switch it, bylaws are supposed to be reviewed every 5
fine.
years.
Yeah.
But that was the only
You
reason
mean if we
why.
change the town election to be November or whatever?
Exactly.
What is in the charter?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's outside of our scope.
But that could change, I think his point
But
is it
that's
would
what we-
change, and then that would warrant a change here. If the annual town election date changes, this would still follow that you'd have to elect your chair and vice chair after whatever the town election is.
Right, the only part about adding June in, which was your initial suggestion, was, I was just wondering if that's in the town charter as June. Then we would just be having consistency, I don't think
Yeah.
we need to add it,
David's looking now, I think.
but if it is in the town charter as June, then it would just be consistency, so I don't really see an issue with adding it then.
Uh-oh. Sorry. I was a bit distracted. What are we on? Oh, the finance committee and the meeting?
The town election. Does it say annual town election?
And my question was, in the charter, does it specifically say June town election in the charter?
Yes. Yes, the charter does say that
Well,
about.
So the Recreation Committee had language that I kind of liked. It says the Recreation Committee shall elect a chairperson and a vice chairperson from its regular members at the April meeting immediately following appointment of a new committee. So if we just said following the appointment of a new committee, the first regularly scheduled meeting following the appointment of a new committee, that would take election out of it. The moderator's gotta make his appointments in June.
I'm fine with it changing to that.
Here's I don't want to throw a wrench in.
Nope.
There's appointment of the committee, so then when you move away and they have to replace you, has the committee been reappointed?
Well, so if
In
the
the middle
chair
of a
was to
term. In
resign,
the middle of a term.
yeah, if the chair was to resign in the middle of a term, I guess it would probably, immediately would default to the vice chair.
Know what I'm
If the
saying?
committee wanted to-
Does that trigger the committee to have to
if there's a new member added to complete the committee, does that trigger another reorganization?
I don't think so, because they normally, in my experience, they've been appointed before the term starts, or the session starts, or it's just an empty seat.
Or they're appointed to finish someone's term.
To fill a
Yeah.
vacancy?
So if someone
there's-
resigns on the committee, say, two years, and it was a 3-year term, someone then may be appointed in by the town moderator, so that is the person who appoints the committee, to finish a 1-year term.
Yep.
I don't think it's really
Not gonna
triggering
trigger it. That's fine, we just
a
wanted to
new-
think about that.
new
yeah.
restructuring of a committee, because it's someone being appointed to finish off the initial appointment. So do we like the rec department language, or should we keep it with the annual town election?
It's following a town election or following the appointment of a new committee is basically,
I think it's fine to do following the town election. I mean, because I think it's gonna naturally flow anyway.
I think it's
So-
more
Yeah.
clear. I think keeping election in there makes it a little bit more clear.
Do we add June in, as it is in the charter?
I don't think it's necessary because it is already covered elsewhere.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, and to your point, you know, something that I mentioned in the last meeting was the idea of having this, you know, done once a year is, I think, more of a backstop.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And that's what, we're just reviewing all the feedback that we received
Yeah.
by reaching out for these 8 bylaws and getting through the final point of opinion on them. Okay, so chapter 125 is the next bylaw that we had minor adjustments to, meetings of towns, boards. So we had a lot of discussion because we do have currently elected boards, committees, commissions, trustees that are not regular videoed and recorded by Walpole Media. I did reach out to Tamara for Walpole Media and asking, because part of our concern was the capacity of Walpole Media to cover all these meetings, where are all these meetings occurring, the equipment in the rooms, how many rooms we have that are already equipped for recording of these things. And the response was that it would be difficult, and that there's priority for, you know, public, the 2 channels, the public and the education. And that Walpole Media is a pretty small organization, so that would be difficult. So the language we put, all elected appointed boards within the town, because we do have a number of appointed boards that are regularly recorded, such as Finance Committee, would be available. So we had talked about some elected commissions and boards, trustees, that have never requested to be recorded. And it's not. So we're just kind of changing the language that they would be available, and if the cable provider was available to do the recordings as well. So as far as the feedback I got, what our adjustments were okay. Anyone else have anything else to add to it?
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think there's probably a mechanism in place that we could, for appointed boards anyway, if those appointing them want a specific meeting to be recorded, then we can make that happen, right? I mean, but
Right.
in the matter of course, the Recreation Committee is an example. Since I've been involved, we haven't had any meetings recorded, and nobody ever shows up, and nobody provides comments. It is what it is, but we should be required to make it available if circumstances dictate that it's a big issue.
Right.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want any boards to, if there was a lot of interest in, say, the Recreation Committee, something was coming up, you know, the fields, or there was some kind of important issue, I wouldn't want that committee to be able to duck
Yep.
being, you know,
That's my point.
being required to.
Shall make themselves available, yeah.
Yeah.
what's the trigger? Is it the chair saying, I want this to happen, this is a very sensitive issue? Is it a citizen saying, you know, Mr. Chair, or, you know, Chair, whatever, make it available? I mean,
Can we just put in, shall make
Forces.
themselves available if requested by anybody? But,
I think it's subject to the language is good because it's subject, first and foremost, it's subject to the availability of these fine people over here. And if there's a select board meeting and at the same time as a recreation committee meeting, but in that case, if there is a big issue that people have feedback on, you would figure out a way to have the meeting on a night that it could be recorded. You would postpone it, you would do it a week later or 2 weeks later, you would figure it out, I think. The chair's discretion, because if you say as requested,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is if you want to be as requested, it could be as requested by the select board. But I don't want to burden them with that either.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot of,
I think
Yeah.
it's adding up.
that's too much.
No, and I do think that if there are issues of importance to the town that are being heard by particular boards or committees, you know, the decision of which boards or committees to cover is one that's well within the capabilities of Walpole Media, you know, to make that decision on their own. Again, you know, availability of the cable provider, you know, they could say, well, you know, we know this is important, a lot of people are interested in this, we're gonna make ourselves available by reallocating resources from somewhere else.
And like you said, rec committee, people do not maybe attend the meeting, but they are open. They're posted.
They're open, they're
So,
posted, yep.
You know, that they are open meetings, these meetings are posted. Members of the community are, you know, should be able to attend them. Beyond putting stricter language in, I'm comfortable with the suggestions that
Yep,
we made.
I like the revisions.
All right. Chapter 177, is that the next one?
Records and reports.
Records and reports. We did not have any, we did not have any specific language changes to this, I don't believe. I think we just had questioned and asked about the availability, time frame. It is going digital, it's a process, funds are put towards that so that we can continue to go towards more digital and have years in the past be handled digitally as well. But I do not think at this time we had any specific language changes to that.
I don't remember.
All right, I mean, did we, I don't know if it's appropriate, but did we want to include any language, non-binding language, encouraging the town clerk to make records digital or digitize records to the best of their ability?
Did Liz send something on this? I forget.
What I have from feedback for her, because this, I had asked about 177 for her to just review as the town clerk, because we've had a lot of discussions concerning that. She put most records are available on the town website, especially common information that people are requiring, minutes of meetings, agendas, posted on their respective department web pages. Zoning decisions cases are online back to 2017. Public record requests are handled digitally, and if we find a request in a frequent flyer, then we add it to the website.
Is there, I missed this last conversation, but, I mean, I know the focus, a lot of this has been, you go on the town website and there are some boards and committees where there's no minutes for an extended period of time, and they still may not be current even now. Is there a way to just put a deadline in there? Like, they have to be,
We talked
they
about
have to be
that last
posted,
week,
but
too.
within.
And I think that is more.
Within 2 months of the meeting or something, like, not
You know,
unreasonable?
And I think that's where, we're not really, as I feel like, hung up on the digital aspect. There's
Yeah.
funds, the town is slowly making them digital. This committee, when it was reappointed, they went to
Yeah.
the attic and pulled down the files and it got them out to us as well as for digital copies. I think our issue is more that there are some committees and boards that do not get them on the website in a timely manner.
That's really, I think there should be a deadline, I think.
And
Yeah.
I think we have to be careful with the deadline. What I said last time was that, like, I'm a volunteer. I don't like watching 3-4 hours of tape to make sure I get all the minutes in, but that's what I've been doing. And so it's really, like, last week's, I've been looking at the minutes for 2 weeks. I'm only halfway, or I'm sorry, I've been watching the meeting from last time for the last couple of weeks, and I'm still only halfway through the minutes, because I'm trying to get everything. And so I don't, something like 2 months, that's a pretty broad time frame. But if all of a sudden you've got, you know, bi-weekly meetings or bi-monthly meetings, you're just constantly doing
How about
minutes.
within a certain period of time after the minutes are
Well,
approved?
I guess the thing that,
Once they're approved, can we have a deadline after they're approved? That, because,
about posting,
I mean, once I see your point. The work is putting the minutes together, right? And some boards, not to keep talking about the rec committee, but we don't really meet over the summer. We take, so you can't say they have to be posted within 30 days of the meeting because we go away. But once they're approved by that respective board or committee, what's the holdup?
Yeah, I think there is,
I mean, I don't know if it's in this language or not. I don't think it is.
no.
No, it's not really, and that's what I think we kind of keep coming back to, is how do you put, because in the bylaws, really, as you read through them, there's no deadlines in any bylaw.
Right.
There's just, here's the expectation, and it's there, so meetings should be posted, open meeting, agendas should be posted, but there's no deadlines in any of the bylaws. Being that most boards, committees are volunteers, there's
Yeah.
many boards and committees that is a volunteer who is being the secretary of the committee, then it gets a little trickier.
Yeah.
But putting, like, say, 90 days after minutes have been approved by the committee, I feel like that's still a pretty generous time frame, and,
Yeah, I mean, they could take 6 months to approve the minutes, but, but then when
Yeah.
they're approved,
But then I almost
Then we're
wonder,
done.
is there a point in bothering if it's gonna drag on that long? I agree with Doug. I think if you put a deadline on there and try to hold people to a deadline and they're volunteers, it's gonna deter people from volunteering. If anybody wants to actually follow up on that and say, well, you're late.
yeah, well, I mean, I think it's important too, like maybe I'm wrong, but like for the planning board, water and sewer, select board, somebody's keeping the minutes that's not a member of that committee.
Right,
It's
and they're paid.
Yeah,
They're
but
paid,
that's,
yeah.
that's where it comes an overtime issue, right? Are
Right.
they doing it every?
No, but I'm
weekend?
saying they can't, you can't, I don't know if you can have that person for every single committee, right? That's
Right,
the point.
yeah,
Like somebody,
absolutely.
like Brendan keeps the records for the rec committee, he's the rec director, he runs the, like, he keeps the minutes. I don't know how quickly he does them, but he does them, right? So that's okay, but, I don't know, I think a deadline after approval is probably the simplest thing. Can't mandate how quickly they get approved, but.
Well, so the state law, chapter 30A, subsection 22C of the open meeting law requires minutes to be produced in a timely fashion, but does not provide a definition for timely fashion. So if we say 2 months, is somebody gonna come back and say, well, the open meeting law says this, and is that gonna be a conflict of some sort? I don't,
And what do we have? I can't see that far.
I'm sorry, I can.
No, what do we have? Does it mention timely fashion in our?
Oh.
Bylaws or
I don't-
no?
I don't think it does.
It
I
just
don't
says
think
they should keep cause the records of their doings and accounts to be kept in suitable books, open to the inspection of citizens. I mean, we don't have to specifically add language to have it posted on the website, I don't think, but, something like as soon as reasonably practical after approval of the minutes by said board or committee.
We could even say timely fashion
Well,
according to
that's
I'd
chapter
go with
30.
timely
Keep it
fashion, just keep it
consistent with the
consistent.
state. Put timely fashion, even though there's not a deadline, but to put a little bit more emphasis on
I think that's fine.
Wow.
the posted.
Well, geez, Doug, I mean, now that you turned me on to this section here, it's, the second sentence there says, "The minutes of an open session, if they exist and whether approved or in draft form, shall be made available upon request by any person within 10 days."
I hadn't gotten to that section yet, or that sentence.
Yeah, no, that was section 22C.
Does anybody want to see it? Do you want me to pull it up?
No, I believe what he read.
Yeah, it says, "Minutes of all open sessions shall be created and approved in a timely manner. The minutes of an open session, if they exist and whether approved or in draft form, shall be made available upon request by any person within 10 days." Now, I mean, that sounds like a deadline to me.
Wait, where is this?
But
MGL
that's saying you don't
22C?
even need to
That
take
does not
them.
mean they have to be posted online, though.
Yeah, that doesn't mean they have to be posted online, but they have to be made available.
What is this,
But it-
chapter 30?
But it says even
Chapter
if they
30, section
exist.
22,
So this says, the
Subsection
open
C.
meeting law says chapter 30A.
or 30A, excuse me, yes.
I'd vote to keep with timely fashion, because I think that leaves it even more open.
Or we could say subject to the open meeting law and not,
Well,
based on what David's reaction was, I don't know.
Okay, so I would say that let us bring this to Liz, Jim Johnson, and Town Council, and reference open meeting laws, chapter 30, section A.
Yeah, I mean, we know the reality of this is that,
30A,
30A.
yeah.
Okay, 30A.
chapter 22, we know the reality is that it's a town employee somewhere that's in charge of posting this stuff on the website, right? So we have to be mindful of that. But if the chair of the board says, here's the minutes, and they aren't posted within a couple weeks, they should follow up and say, where are the
If the
minutes?
feedback is not as favorable as our discussion, are we comfortable with adding timely fashion?
Yeah,
I mean, you could even go further, and when it's somebody that's paid, I know we brought up the overtime issue, but it does seem like if a board is important enough to have a paid secretary taking the notes, they should have a tighter timeline. Like, the finance committee, the planning board needs to have a tighter timeline than the bylaws committee, the recreation committee, where it's volunteers, and there aren't a lot of people.
I guess you
For the
could do
minutes.
that, but sometimes, like with the finance committee, I guess they move so quickly that by the time the minutes all of the minutes would be available, the town meeting's already over. And that may be different with zoning, but.
I'm gonna reach out for feedback on this and reference the open meeting law, and then we can email out.
well, here's a question. We don't have to get into this in detail, but is there a transcription service that we can use as a has anybody investigated that to transcribe the FinCom meeting? And that's the minutes? It's 273 pages, but that's the minutes?
Well, I guess my feeling is that if we, we did have someone who kept the minutes. They did it for a long time. And I think that people would look to bring those types of positions back as opposed to going and getting a third party to do it, but,
Well, it would just be a software,
okay.
But then I think we're requesting that there's a major change in procedure. Which I'm
That
not
would be pretty great to have software to do that.
well, yeah, when I was doing casework, that's what, I would have come home from a deposition and make a call on my phone and just dictate all the stuff that happened. And a couple hours later, I'd get a Word document with my
Right, and
verbal
I-
output, and I could change it up. It
And
was
I
nice.
think we went back to, I'm thinking of prior meetings where we kind of went over minutes, is that how minutes are presented can be very different, but the point of having minutes and making these available may not necessarily be for a dictation of every bit of discussion, because you want them to be user-friendly. Because, so if you're like, I really want to know what was going on with planning board for this address, something that came on that's very specific, 230 pages, you're not gonna try to go on the website and go through, but you're gonna look and say, oh, this gives me this three paragraphs gives me a little bit of a clue, and then maybe I'll go back and watch the video, which are usually available.
I can, if you want, I can take a closer look at 38, 22, and just make sure, because maybe just making an addition to this provision somewhere, saying specifically in compliance with chapter 30A, section 22, A, B, C, D, whatever specific one, as long as we're comfortable with that. Because as David pointed out, it's timely fashion, but then if it exists, which means there's a possibility it doesn't exist, it has to be available within 10 days. So to get around from that, you just don't do it. It's just not really, so I'll dig hard into that.
That would be great, because you could, something, even wording of timely fashion, and/or if requested, be available within 10 days.
Yeah.
One sentence of that. Okay, so the next one was,
Madam Chair, I have
yes,
a point of personal privilege, if I may.
absolutely.
May we have more light in this room?
Oh, sure. We can go hit the light. But actually, Brad, what's right there next to you now that the sun has set?
Let there be light.
Feel like a
Thank you.
mole coming out of that.
Everyone give
It's
you
nice and
guys a
cool.
moment to adjust. Okay, so the next bylaw, this one was Recreation Department, Recreation Committee, in which we did receive some feedback. Part of our questions that our changes were based on was that it seemed that the rec committee had more control and that the role and what is currently going on is a little different. And we did receive feedback concerning this. Doug reached out to the Recreation Committee as well, and reviewing the recreational director's job description.
Yeah, and so I didn't, one of the concerns, and I guess I'm kind of addressing it to Brad, you know, I think you were here when Jim mentioned that the language about the rec director, which is up on the screen, reporting to the town, being appointed by the town administrator, but being under the control of the rec committee was something he wanted to address. I reached out to the rec director, who didn't really have an opinion. When we had this meeting last time, people were kind of saying, well, what does the rec director do? And so I was gonna take some of that job description and throw it in here, so there's some more duties and things like that. I did reach out to the committee. I reached out to the chair. I reached out to Joe. I got feedback from Rich, who was fine with these things, with making the recommendations or the adjustments. So the recreation director is appointed by the town administrator, removing the reference to the recreation committee. But then it got me thinking about the annual budget and whether or not we had to adjust that section of it, because in reality, it's kind of Brendan's budget, or it's a budget that Brendan creates, the rec committee kind of, you know, confirms or votes on, I guess, in a way, and it kind of becomes a rec budget, but I made some slight adjustments to that. You probably can't even see it. But anyways, as a member of the committee, I haven't really gotten any strong feedback. I'm not sure if you have any.
No, I mean, the practical reality is we're there as a check, right? So if Brendan approves the budget and we're essentially tasking him with creating the
Yeah.
budget, and his bosses are supervising his expenditures and they know where the money's coming in and coming out. We don't have the ability to create that budget as a committee, but we offer our input, we offer our advice, and we offer our votes on when things need to be voted on, on a budget. I don't remember the last time we voted on something
Yeah.
budget related, other than like probably a non-binding approval, like we think this is an appropriate use of funds, you should request this to fix the pool or whatever.
Or user fees.
But
that
we
go
don't get
into
to
the budget.
actually determine that that's gonna be granted. That's up to the town budget approval
Right.
process, right? So we just say, this is what we think we need. So I think this is fine. I think Brendan works well with the committee, and I have no problems with this language.
Any other input?
I feel like I have to spice up the recreation director piece.
Add like one more
Yeah.
sentence in there.
Something, you know, like subject to duties in his job description or something vague, but, and maybe I don't. That was, I think, a comment that you made, David. And so I was trying to be open to adding something there. I'm not sure if you had any idea of what you might want, or what.
No, not really. I mean, I'm not familiar with what, you know, the ins and outs of the rec committee and what all they do.
Yeah,
but-
I didn't mean it so much like that, but you came up with a comment about, well, what does the rec director do if he's not under the control of the rec committee, you know? And again, I'm paraphrasing, but.
Yeah.
What would you envision being in here, like that, you know, say that he oversees all recreational items within the town?
Or would
Would
you
you
like
like
into considerations recommendations from the rec committee?
Yeah, I mean, my observation was just that here's this section that talks about appointing a rec director, and then it doesn't say anything else. So, I mean, my sort of options here are, do we just get rid of this section as superfluous, or do we actually put some teeth in it? Because, you know, it just sort of seems detached from the rest of the bylaw.
I don't necessarily want to put too many teeth in there, right? Because if you talk about the job description, then you've embedded a job description in a bylaw.
Right.
That's not good.
Does the job description include working with the recreation
I
committee?
honestly haven't looked at it. So.
Say that
You
again?
just sent it last night or the night before, I think.
What was your question, Sue?
If the job description of the recreation director includes language saying part of their responsibility is to work with the recreation committee, either in conjunction with or under the advice of, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we get into the chapter above that, 182, or the section above that, 182.2, right? I mean, you could empower, you could specifically empower the committee to delegate its authority to the recreation director to carry out those functions of being in charge of the recreational activities, right? And so in 182.3, you could say, shall be appointed by the town administrator and shall work under the, shall work with the recreation committee as required, or something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what the current
Cooperation
language
with?
says, though, right? Subject to and under the control of the recreation committee.
Well, but that, I think
I guess control is
the
the-
control is the issue there, right? Like, the recreation committee doesn't get to tell Brendan, you can't offer this program, right? Like, we don't get to, we're not his bosses in that way. The control means.
Advisory committee.
We're in more of an advisory committee, so control of the recreation committee versus
So in cooperation
in
with.
cooperation or collaboration with the recreation committee, I think is more the spirit of how this really operates.
Yeah, and that was sort of my observation, is that the rec director is kind of disconnected from the committee, and that relationship isn't really described in the bylaw, so.
Yeah.
Having, it may not, it may be enough just to put that relationship in the bylaw without including specific job
I
responsibility.
think there's a good, within the definition, now that Sue shamed me, I did look at it. No, no, it's-
It would have taken me a good 2 hours to locate
But it does
that.
say that the recreation director is responsible for the development, implementation, and administration of a wide variety of social, cultural, and recreational opportunities for the Walpole community. And we could keep something very, implementation, and administration of social, cultural, recreational opportunities. I mean, or we can keep that.
Where is that?
It's a job description.
Yeah,
So,
from where?
Jim sent it. It's,
Gotcha. It's just their internal description of
yeah,
what,
yeah.
of what it is.
And it's not, it's the definition of the recreation director.
Gotcha.
But does that need to be included in the bylaws?
I don't.
No,
know
I
that
don't
it
think
does.
so.
I don't think so.
So then let's just,
I don't think so. My concern was more the relationship between the recreation director and the committee, Because otherwise, we're just creating a government position that has no purpose, no relation to any other position. It's just sort of there. That was my concern.
Which is really not at all true, right? Because he does a ton of stuff. So, yeah, maybe just instead of shall be subject to and under the control of the recreation committee, we don't strike that whole thing. We just say and shall work in collaboration with the recreation committee. And it's still tying him to the committee instead of just being this loose, director of nothing.
Yeah, you have to forgive me. I'm a lawyer. When I see words, I like to believe that they have meaning, and I see director, and I'm like, okay, what is this person directing? I have no idea.
All right, we will put forth that recommendation.
There's a lot of employees, that's for sure.
I know. Okay, so that is 182, rec committee. The next piece was revolving funds, and Doug did receive some feedback. There's 2 minor changes to make on the revolving funds, and a third one that may not be ready for
So-
fall meeting.
so with revolving funds, we had talked about, we haven't got into fund values, there are thresholds for all the funds. And I guess I can probably pull it up because I'm still on 360. But we were going to address, we're gonna remove net metering as a fund. The DOR does not like the way we do our books, so that's no longer a fund that we need, so we can remove that net metering fund. We were going to rename the Turco Field Maintenance and Turf Replacement Fund. We haven't figured out a specific name. It could just be, Field Maintenance and Replacement Fund. I think,
So Jody had
I think Brendan recommended the synthetic turf fund, something like that, but,
Artificial turf or synthetic turf
yeah,
replacement fund.
just, so it doesn't say Turco, now that we have
Yep.
multiple fields.
Exactly.
And then, Jody came up with another fund that she wanted to add, you'll have to forgive me, I'm trying to, it was
But it was not gonna be ready.
performance surety deposits, and I have no idea what that means, chapter 44, section 53G1/2, but it's not something that we actually have specifics on, so it wouldn't be ready for this go-around with the bylaws.
What about, I brought up, Adams Farm Committee has a revolving fund, but that's not on here.
I haven't gotten through all the minutes yet.
No,
And that may be,
Doug, what was that reference, 44 what?
53G1/2, 53G.
and Jody just came back, so we just received the feedback, just, I'd say within the last
Last night?
48 hours,
Yeah.
yeah. So we will double check on that one.
But then there was, I guess, I asked another question to Jim, and I haven't gotten a response to that, was whether or not, I'm not sure if, because it's a special fund, if it has to be established some other way. You know, when we did net metering, it wasn't established through it was a standalone town warrant article.
This is like, yeah, this is like a bond.
Okay.
This is like a, if you're, whether it's a construction project or some other thing, they have to put up.
And that
Surety
maybe have to
bond.
do with all the middle
We have
school.
to put that in a
requirement
specific
that's done
place.
ahead of time. Right,
We don't have that, you're saying she said that we don't, that fund doesn't exist?
Correct. What exists, you can't possibly see from where you're sitting. So
No, but I say, the fund exists, but it doesn't exist in,
it doesn't exist in the bylaw,
In the
so she
language,
wanted to
yes.
create that.
Yeah,
But I
we
don't
should do
know
that.
if we can, if we can create it through the bylaw, just say this funding exists, or if we have to, go further and have it be a standalone warrant article where we say, this is the fund, this is what it does, and it's gonna be part of the bylaws. That was kind of my question. When we did net metering, it was again, that was 2 years ago, but it was a standalone warrant article. It wasn't part of a bylaw thing, but again, the bylaw committee
and
hadn't
it's
met.
been removed and reallocated within the budget per DOR.
yeah, so we probably want guidance from town council, can we just add another line item to this chart or not?
Yeah, and that was a question I asked Jim, and just haven't.
Are we
received
changing the
feedback.
amounts too? I missed, sorry.
We haven't received any guidance on that yet.
Okay.
so.
Yeah, just
I think Jody
skimming,
said she reached out to the department heads and did not receive feedback from departments heads on whether those amounts should be increased.
Right.
Like, I can tell you that the turf replacement fund should be increased. Because $500,000 won't go very far,
Not with 3 fields.
not with 3 fields. That's maybe 1 field. Which is
So-
fine, except the spending limit is what, annual? So if you have to do the ones in South Walpole at the same time, which you would want to do, you're going to exceed that limit.
Okay, so we will follow back up on that.
Um,
Maybe request a meeting with Jody to go over them, since our timeline is, within 3 weeks. The turf one, when we read it, that's not enough.
Oh, no, yeah, no.
And we had mentioned that
But I don't know what the other ones, if the other ones are enough either.
And they are, again, you can't read that, but
No, I am looking at it on the, I have it here, but like, I don't even know, what is a recreation revolving fund? Do we know?
I think that's just to be reinvested into the programs, but, I don't know that it's more specific than that.
All right.
I'm not sure what the balances are in these funds at the, because that may give us a better idea too of where
well, I think
the
that's-
amounts,
I think that's a great point. I mean, if you have, a fire alarm maintenance as an example here, is a $20,000 cap on that annually, which to me, I'm not sure that's anything I would want to cap. If it's fire alarm maintenance, you wanna, but if there's $500,000 in that account and we can only
just
spend
when you say that, though,
$20,000 a year,
because
this is not being done right.
We do discuss it, you know, in previous years at Finance Committee, AED replacements and
Yep.
different things, and people are concerned with the amount that it costs, so.
Yeah.
Some people may appreciate that cap.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Until there's a fire.
All right, so this is another bylaw that does, there's still not major changes, but it does require quite a bit of feedback still and clarification.
But is
Right.
this,
I want to jump in here. There may be major changes for the surety bonds, because just sort of reading through this section 53G and a half, it says that the town has to provide by a bylaw to allow this to be done, and that bylaw has to specify a whole bunch of different things. So there would have to be a separate bylaw that specifically addresses all of these issues here if we wanted to add this as a revolving fund.
Out of which one is a revolving fund?
The surety,
one that Jody suggested, the performance?
And she said that will not be ready for this fall town meeting, that she would be, I think, looking for the spring.
What is a surety fund?
it's sort of a deposit to make sure that you perform certain tasks. So if you're building a building, you know, there may be a certain amount of money that the town wants you to put in an account ahead of time, you know, to sort of prove that you're gonna follow through with it.
Just putting up a bond.
Similar
Think of-
to
think of-
escrow,
think-
okay.
it's
Yeah,
think
it's
of a
like an
bond for,
escrow,
you know,
yeah.
Jail bond, it's the same thing. You put up money and they have to appear or you lose your money. It's the same thing. By putting up
Yeah.
this $10 million project, I'm gonna have a $1.8 million bond that is gonna cause a, you know, so if I walk off the job, the town's not scrambling to keep things going or start afresh. They have something in,
Okay.
yeah. But it sounds like it's all very complicated. I only looked at it briefly, so we'd have to investigate that for sure,
But
especially if
that's-
we have a fund ongoing already.
But that
I
doesn't-
think my point is, it's not going to be as simple as just adding another line item to this table.
Okay, and so we'll reach out. Jody just gave us the feedback within 40 hours because she was away. But we'll read it, but what her feedback was is that piece was not going to be ready for the town warrant for the end of August.
So then would this be something else that she would want our committee to look at for the spring warrant? In addition to the animal control that's already
And I
teed
think-
up?
Right, but I think those are the only two. So I think feel that we've gotten through quite a bit all right. All right, and our last one to review, which is pretty simple language as well, was chapter 219. And this, what we wanted to change was removing what is in the warrant currently of posting in 2 public places in each precinct, to 2 public places, town clerk's office and town library. And that it would be posted on the town website, the warrant. And that received favorable feedback from Jim as well as Liz.
I can envision negative feedback from others, but I think it's try to simplify this in this digital age. Anybody that wants to know can go to town hall.
And it would be still at 2 public buildings, so the town library and town hall. In the obscure places of the 8 precincts of, no one would have to, they'd have to find the secret list to find out really where they were. Some of them are quite obscure. So, any other feedback on this? Okay. So I have a punch list of follow-up based on any discussion we had tonight for review, specifically on chapter 17. We'll be waiting to still to hear back from Jeff. Chapter 125, Brad is going to look more into the compliance on that. Chapter 125, we were good on. Chapter 177, I'm sorry. Brad, you had said you would look more in the compliance on
Yep.
that. Adding one more line of the, not necessarily the job description, but just including, kind of bridging that in, that the recreation committee under the rec director follow up with Jody and Jim on chapter 187.
David's gonna do clean up 45.
Maybe we'll clean up chapter 45.
Works for me. And we need to find a date before the 15th?
Do we want to vote on our June?
I thought the 15th was the
We have
date.
our minute meetings that we did not vote on
Excuse me.
for the June 14th minute
June.
meeting. Did anyone have a chance to review or have any changes to recommend?
I wasn't here, so I can't vote on them.
And that's why we didn't vote on it prior before, because
Didn't have enough.
Sue would also have abstained, so, okay,
Right.
so we will hold off on voting on those. But they are available if anyone would like to.
Is this a typo, man?
Available on the town's website, is
If
it?
somebody
In
asks,
draft
I can
form?
get it, yeah.
They're drafted, so if anyone would like them, we can make them available.
Yeah, and
But
just,
we'll wait to vote on those until we have a quorum that can vote on it. We won't have people that would be abstaining. I would say, based on feedback and getting these bylaws ready, that tentatively, we know how long it takes. I think Doug and I worked pretty hard to get the feedback we got for tonight. We met, 2 weeks ago? We met July 7th. We did 2 weeks. July 4th, I think, would be a little bit,
August.
August 4th would be a little bit tight.
What's,
I'm away the next week,
you're here, you're gone when, Ally?
the week of the 6th, like that Saturday, the 6th to the 13th.
Okay. And so it's either the,
So we talked
it's
briefly
either the
about a Zoom
4th or it's
meeting.
the 15th before David and then I take off. So 4th or 15th, if that works for the other 3 people that aren't here and enough of us, then I think we just do it.
4th is a Thursday?
Yes.
15th is a Monday.
I could do either.
I said, I should be able to be here for either of those, but worst case, if we make this a Zoom meeting or, we could do that.
Okay, I will get agendas ready for those and have them posted so that if we do receive enough feedback, we can go with the 4th. If there's still a little bit more to work through, I would say we wait till the 15th.
Okay.
'Cause I don't want to have a meeting where it's kind of just like a roundabout of, oh, we're still haven't received feedback. That doesn't seem to be productive for us. But we can work out, and I always find it's easier for those action items to kind of get out and try to get that feedback right away.
Yeah.
And we'll see what we come back with. Does anyone have anything else to add? No? Anyone want to set a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, motion to adjourn the meeting, say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone, and we are wrapped for tonight.
Excellent.